we bought this farm back in 2016, we had no inkling that this was going to be what it is now, even close to it. I had no thought about leaving my career that I'd been at for 25 years almost, and the pandemic had something to do with that. You know, I was one of those people who, I was stressed at work. I was, running 60 hours a week and working to the bone for somebody else. And I was always happy with that because it was just the way I'd always done it.
So thank you guys so much for letting me tour your farm. There's so many little details in here that I think will just apply to so many people. And I know that one of the biggest questions that people have about homesteading or wanting to get into farming and this whole kind of lifestyle is, going from no knowledge to then learning how to garden and raise all these animals. How do you transition financially to do it? Is it just growing food for your family? Is it trying to go full-time and be a full-time farm and have all the income provided? Like, there's so many ways that you can do this, so there's not one right way, and it kind of depends on your family and what you're trying to accomplish. And so I just thought it would be beneficial to other people to share your kind of journey over the last 6 years and how you did all this with a family of 8.
Yeah.
How you did that.
I think the pandemic.
Working from home for a year and a half.
Yeah, working from home for a year and a half, but also just the realness of what it exposed about the world,
The food system, the
society.
You guys have shortages here?
Yeah.
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 Right. Mostly toilet paper.
Toilet paper apocalypse 2020.
We had everything else because we already had, by the time 2020 came around, we already had our pantry set up. We already had like extra flour and grain and like all of the things. Like, we didn't have to worry about anything immediately.
Yeah, that's great.
Except for toilet paper.
When people talk,
but we can handle that.
When you saw bad things on the news, people were running out to, McDonald's to make sure they got a couple extra value meals, and I was buying, 50 extra pounds of rice just so, we would have it immediately.
Right.
We saw that.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people just didn't see that, but that caused me, and it caused us to really have a lot of conversation about what's important.
What could we do to make things better?
And we started making a plan at that point of, okay, maybe a 5-year plan of, doing this more full time, so I didn't have to be living that life anymore.
And we'd already planned the flower farm before the pandemic. We were going to start You Pick Flowers as a way to supplement and help to be able to have all these animals, because just selling the babies and baby goats doesn't pay for the goats.
No.
So that we can have the milk. We can't just sell their babies and make enough to cover their care. So we were like, well, we can sell some flowers and make enough to cover our garden expenses. That was the original kind of try to offset it just enough to make it so that the homesteading part of it wasn't so expensive.
Yeah, the first year we did the Plant Start CSA, the idea was maybe we can make enough money selling plant starts that it will pay for our seeds. Or pay.
Because I buy a lot of different things to grow. I don't, and you have to buy the whole packet every time.
Started out as that, and we did it one year and found out, wow, if we tweak this and if we tweak that, this can actually make some good money. So,
with not a lot of labor increase.
Yeah, 3 years into it, it's actually a decent part of our income.
Especially in the winter.
Yeah. I like how you approached it, thinking of is, we want milk for our family. We're going to start there, or have a garden. Now, what are some ways we can bring in more revenue from something to pay for that? And then you're already paying for that before you add on your next thing. And then you add on your next thing, okay, what can we do to supplement that more? And then that's how you kind of figured out some of these different business ideas.
Right.
And, I'm not discounting the fact that we were, I don't know what word you use, lucky, blessed, whatever it is, that, I did have a good job. I made good money, and we came into this with a nest egg. We came into it with money to invest in the farm. So we didn't go into debt to do any of this. And I think that's really important, especially in this day and age. You don't want to be, I want to own what we're putting in.
Right.
And I know not everybody has that luxury of coming from a situation where you have that, but my advice to people would be, as much as you can, start out small. Start with, how can I do this to cover my cost? And then once you do it, you're going to say, I could be more efficient at that. I could increase production here. I could cut costs there. and turn this into a profit center.
Lots of the stuff that we do, like with the plants, we figured out, okay, this is how much I can grow with our current greenhouses. We figured all that out and then sold that much this year. So we knew what we were going to, because we had to cap our pre-orders on our plants. But now I can look at it and say, I know I need this much space to grow this much. So how much money do we want to make? Like, and how much can we handle growing? So it's like,
we'll back into it.
we'll take, so I need this much to cover winter. So back into it, how many plants is that? How much do I need to charge for them? Like, what investments do we need to make in order to grow that much? We're going to have to add a greenhouse. Yeah, and but it's like, we've already got, we've had no problem selling what we needed to in the past with the plants, and we had to turn people down.
But we've also done that with the farm tour type things.
Yes.
We come in, okay, how much income do we need to meet the gap between the plant starts, between summer flowers, and the animals we're going to sell? Well, that left X as a dollar figure. How do I back into that number? Okay, well, I've got to do this many tours a week for the window that we want to do them in the spring.
When the babies are little and fun and everybody wants to play with them.
Yeah.
So, and then we figure out how much work we need to put into it based on how much we need to get, and how much you charge too, because like that's.
So this is something that every business should be doing, but a lot of us don't do. We don't put some sort of business plan together. A lot of farmers, even myself, like just start doing it.
Yeah.
And I'll figure it out later. But having these systems in place and thinking about profit and loss and all these, the more these business ideas in the beginning and seeing what what is my goal?
Yeah, start with a goal and figure out how you're going to get there. Like, what's our goal with flowers, or what's our goal with plants? Because if I tried to say what was our goal with all of this never would have happened.
Right.
It's had to be smaller, because I wouldn't have.
From an accounting perspective, I think it's important to track what you're spending, especially if you have multiple lines of business. We break things up into the plant starts, in garden plants, the flowers. We also have a line for dried flowers, so things that we dry, process, make wreaths, flower crowns, bridal bouquets, kind of value-added flowers. The animals are a big line item, so we track all of our costs per line item or per line of business, and as well as the revenue on it, to figure out, are we actually making money in all these things? Because it's really easy to mask. If you're doing really well, let's say on the flowers, and you may be losing money on the animals and not know it, because that money, if you just put it all in the system or in your bank account without having a system to track your revenue versus the incoming versus the outgoing. So having kind of a basic chart of accounts that tracks all that, and it can help you make better decisions next year.
Right.
We may focus more on one thing and less on another next year. We're already having conversations about that, because one thing may not be as profitable as we thought it was.
Or it was too much work.
Yes.
Like planting and keeping alive all of these flowers when it was so hot.
Very smart. And so that you can, Curtis Stone is a farmer that I learned a lot from about market gardening, and one of his things is, is the 80-20 rule. Figure out, the 20% of your business is making 80% of your money.
Yeah.
Figure out what that is and then double down on that. And then next year do that same analysis again and do it again until you're, then you're not spending time on things that are making you $10 an hour, $5 an hour.
Exactly. One thing that we've tried to stay away from by necessity is thinking of the by the hour type of a cost structure. You have to value your time. You have to, because nobody else will. But when you're doing things as we are, we're opening our farm to the public for the tours, for the U-Pick flowers. We have to take into account things that aren't necessarily as practical. There's curb appeal. There is, this white picket fence. It's nothing we ever would have done.
That's a great point.
I put it in last year. We've got a decent amount of money in that and labor. We never would have done it otherwise.
Yeah.
So we have to consider that and the labor that goes into it. I mow and she mows.
We push mow that whole flower field to make it look nice for people, because we can't run a riding mower through it and throw grass clippings on the flowers because it looks bad.
And you can't not mow it, because it's, people say, oh, these flowers are beautiful, but gosh, it's nasty. So, if you're going to open your farm to people, bear that in mind. You're going to have to do things that you wouldn't necessarily do if it was just you.
a great point.
Part of the way we do irrigation is different because we're open to the public. We can't have hoses and things out all the time. So everything is under the rows, and we just have to plug the hoses in and then take all of that out again. So it's like each row has its own set of soaker hoses, the flat style, not the drip tape like most people use, because then we can take it all up and store it, and it's all, it doesn't make a big, I don't know, it just worked better for our, and our rows go different directions too, so we would have had to have so many systems.
The transition phase, because you're not working full-time in IT.
Right.
Now you're doing some part-time things locally here. Yeah, can you tell me how you like stage things down, and how that kind of looked, or?
We started out with a spreadsheet.
Is that how you're tracking your expenses?
Yeah.
Or do you use
Yeah,
QuickBooks or just Excel?
it's just Excel.
Yeah.
He's the master of spreadsheets, so it really helped.
Yeah, I have an Excel spreadsheet, and for income we use Square.
Okay.
And we set up categories, but I do transfer all that to a kind of a P&L spreadsheet. So I've got profit tabs and I've got cost tabs, and then they on a master page, like the first tab, it's basically a summary that pulls from all those.
Yes, I know.
So you've got basically, you can look at, profit,
Right.
or income, cost, profit.
Nice.
And then you can, run percentages and things off of that. But
Cool.
a lot of things you got to consider, though. I mean, like I said, it's something maybe a low profit, high work, but maybe it's something you have in an off season, so the value of that money is greater. Like the plant starts, for example. I mean, they are profitable and it's good. I'm not saying it's not, but
Right, but it is a lot of work.
but it's a ton of work. But its value to our family is higher because it's income in February.
And it's bringing in customers early in the season that may buy other products from you.
Exactly.
Sign up
And
for a
name
tour.
recognition.
Almost everybody that comes to pick up plants buys something else too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a loss leader, but it's something that can bring people on the property and.
Yeah, it's marketing.
Yeah.
Even though it's more hours, it's like in March, I want to be in the greenhouse. I don't care what's going on. Like, I'm happy that I'm no longer in the house or out in the snow somewhere. It's not, it's better.
But then the little, like the herb salts and stuff that we sell, we track each of those separately, so we know, is it worth, by the time you grow the herbs, you have to buy salt, you buy the jars, the processing time, the electricity to run the dehydrator, all these different things. So how profitable is it really? Numbers tell a real story, because this is one thing I learned in my career is, emotion will tell you one thing, numbers tell you something different, and merging those together is key.
There's a lot of emotion involved with goats.
Yes. Yeah, that is a huge thing in farming. We get really attached to whatever it may be on our farm. But
whatever it is.
As a business person, you need to be pretty ruthless.
Right, which is why our wool sheep went to live at another farm.
We loved them, but they were just...
They weren't friendly with people. They weren't making babies. They were making wool, but we have enough wool. And we don't do anything with it. We don't have time to mess with the wool. We don't have time to learn that skill.
They need to go somewhere where they're going to be loved.
So they went to another farm where they are focusing on fiber, and we have meat sheep now, or hair sheep, which we've never actually eaten, but whatever.
Not yet.
Not yet. We're still raising them.
That's a great point of every farm, every homestead is going to do this, where they're going to get involved in something that's not going to pan out, not going to work with their system, it's not going to be profitable.
Right, we don't do guineas anymore, we don't do meat turkeys anymore, we just, some things just didn't work.
Don't let yourself get caught up in like, but I spent $500 on these animals, and now they're taking all this time from you, which is taking money from you and your mind and stress on you. Move them out.
Yeah,
and
be
then focus
ruthless.
on.
You've got to be ruthless about it. The way I would look at it is, if you're going to keep those things, then you need to basically call them a pet.
Right.
Because they're not making income.
They're not making income.
Like, we have a nice little pet goat right here. But she actually does make some income because she's so friendly with people, the little white one. Like, she visits with the visitors and is good, but she probably won't ever be able to breed. She was a triplet, she was really small, and we have another one that had a C-section, and we're never going to breed her again. But the nice thing about small goats is they don't eat much.
So one thing I might add on to the whole business side of this for people that are watching, I think it's important for people to think, oh, you pick flowers and, maybe opening your farm to do things. That is a state by state and a community by community thing as to whether or not that is applicable to you. I would highly encourage people to get with their state's agriculture or tourism departments. There are agritourism laws in the state of Missouri where we are that enable us to do this without nearly as much risk.
Yeah.
It's people come onto our farm for agritourism. They are assuming the risk of something that might happen, and it protects us from frivolous lawsuits. You're not going to have that in every state, so definitely do your research before you get emotionally invested in the idea of, I want to start a you-pick flower farm.
And then look into insurance too, the type of insurance that you might need for that because of impossible, frivolous lawsuits. It's unfortunate, but
it's huge.
You need to think about it.
But some states, doing something like this is a non-starter.
Wow.
Especially with animals.
Yes. Okay. So definitely check the laws.
Yeah, it's not just insurance, it is state law.
Got it. And how did you get the courage to say, we're ready, we're going to make the leap of faith and do it?
There's a couple things with that. One would be, it was the end of the pandemic and they were saying he had to go back to work. And the whole...
Go back to the office.
Go back to the office, yes, not back to going there every day. Yes, he was working the whole time. Back to leaving the farm to drive 40 minutes in traffic and all of that. Like that was all coming back, and that was not...
the nightmare was coming back.
Yeah, it was not something that he looked forward to. And then there was all of the other things that were going on around that time with mandates and
forcing people to put things in their body that they may not want to, which nobody should have to do that in a free society, right?
So
hypothetically.
Yeah, there was all that, and really that was early 2021, and so we made the decision to okay, we're going to do this. He found the part-time position that he has now, so that was going to kind of cover the big expenses with the insurance and all that. And then, like I was talking about, where you take the number you need and back into what we have to do to get it. And then we just hoped people would show up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that was the big thing. We were depending on the public to support us. It wasn't just like we're going to grow vegetables and people have to eat. Like that was, we're going to do something fun and hopefully people want to have fun. Because that's pretty much how it worked.
That brings up something that is really important. My career, I was there 27 years. Again, made good money and all these things. A lot of times people get attached to a number. This is what I make, I cannot make less. I think our society has conditioned us to think that if you are going to bring in less dollars, your value is less.
Yeah, and as a man too, that our ego is all tied up in that. And
There's some of that.
Stay-at-home parent, like the whole last 20, whatever, however many years, 16 years since our oldest daughter was born. I have not had, this is that's been your job. This is my job, but before that, I technically didn't have a job, so I was seeing creating things as making money, even though there's no dollars attached to that. That was already in my mind, and that helped him, by creating food for our family, by growing it, that makes up that difference in that number.
Both financially and emotionally. Because going from making, X to making Y as a lesser number, it's not only just emotional. It's like the old adage that when you move into a bigger house, you're going to fill up all the closets. You're never going to have extra space. You're never going to have extra money. Take whatever you're making, add a zero to the end of it. I would almost guarantee you within a couple of years, you'll have found a way that you'll be complaining about money again.
Which part of what we did
It's human nature.
Was we took that spreadsheet of what we absolutely needed, and the difference, he made more than what we absolutely needed. So we tried to take that extra and put it toward debt, and put it towards savings.
We've been doing
And
that for years.
we did that for a few years before this. So we knew we could get by on less than what he already made. Because we kind of tested that first, and then just said this better work.
When I ended up leaving the job, I got a lot of disbelieving, are you serious?
Are you crazy?
Are you crazy? But that's because the mentality is, but you're going to be making less money.
Yeah.
Well,
but
yeah.
I get to spend how much more time with my family,
Right.
and
And we're so conditioned to think that more money is more success.
Yeah.
It's more better.
It's
And
wealth.
yeah.
It's not wealth.
And there's nothing to say that within a couple of years of building this up, I won't be making more money, but that's
Yeah.
not the point.
Mm-hmm,
You know, figure out what that number is that you have to have
to survive.
and build from that, not what you have now and work backwards from it. It's a trap.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I think it is.
And you can make that number lower. You just
Yeah.
have to cut corners, figure out how to so we have to eat all this gluten-free food. Like that's really expensive, but we buy gluten-free grains in bulk, make our own flour. That cuts costs in that area like a ton.
Yeah.
We invested in like a $400 grain mill that's really nice, and it was expensive, but it was 10 years ago.
So it's paid for itself.
Many times over by buying grain instead of gluten-free flour.
And
And
it tastes better. And
better
it's more
nutrition.
Yeah.
It's not oxidizing by sitting in.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and yeah, so there's
And
all
which
these
is
other benefits.
extra important on gluten-free stuff because it gets nasty in a hurry.
Yeah, that's why most people think gluten-free food tastes bad. It's because they're doing it wrong. Yeah, they're it's gross. And pre-packaged gluten-free foods are all made with rice flour and
They usually use toxic seed oils or some other bad stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That's not good. So I know it's.
But to carry that across to anything with your meat, you know, we spend a good chunk of money on chickens and chicken feed, but we have our own eggs and we have our own meat from that.
and we raise the chickens in the summer when we're bringing in money from the farm, and we have them in the winter when the income is not as great. So it's nice to, I mean, it's the same either way, but it feels better. It makes you feel more secure knowing going into winter that you already.
I've got 50 chickens in the freezer. I can make a chicken a week. I can make 2 chickens a week, whatever that number is, and then you supplement that with your beef, with your pork, with your lamb.
And we buy the beef from a local farm because we don't have our own beef yet, and buy the whole yet.
And I would say to people too, don't feel like you have to raise everything on your farm. You don't need to. Like I'm not. You know, I have sheep, pigs, chickens. Like that's fantastic. I buy my milk and I buy my beef, and I have some good sources for that, and that's okay. And you know, some people feel like I got to do everything, but you don't. You shouldn't. I don't think do everything.
So you can also do some, like you could raise pigs one year and chickens the next year, and go back and forth and put them in the freezer. And
especially in the beginning, I'll caveat that as you get more advanced and more experience, you know what you're doing, and you add on more animals and more, and then you can handle it. But some people make a big mistake. I've seen so many homesteads; they'll get all the animals in the first or second year, and they just, you know,
we pretty much did that.
if you haven't had the experience, but did you have a bunch of disasters or?
You know, we
guys
really
seem like
didn't
you
have
adapt pretty
disasters.
well.
We didn't have disasters, but we weren't really like getting much out of it.
Yeah.
Like everybody was alive and cared for, and we enjoyed them, and we were getting all this fertilizer and really helping our land, but we weren't getting a lot back from them. It took like 3 years to really get to where we were. Like this is actually our first year we're getting the amount of milk that I wanted to get. We had to get the right dose and figure out how to feed them. That was the other thing, is we weren't feeding them enough, and then they would lose too much weight, and then we would have to wean or dry them off and be.
But you know, trying things too. One of the most inexpensive sources of meat that you can raise, and we are set up for it, is rabbit.
Right.
However,
We don't like it.
I butchered a bunch of rabbits.
That
was
the first meat we started with.
Man, it's a pain. I do not like butchering rabbits. It's just harder. I hate the smell. There's not enough meat to make it worthwhile. We really don't like the taste that well. If
Like we tried to just hide the taste in soups and things, but we always were finding bones, and we have little kids.
and part of that may be just experience, but we decided early on after doing that twice that, okay, this isn't for us. I'm going to devote that energy towards chickens.
Yeah.
And we can butcher a chicken and get everything out of it. And
it's better than anything we can buy at the store.
Right.
so we keep the rabbits. We use them for fertilizer. They still have multiple uses on our farm, but we're not actively eating them. I guess that's a cautionary tale, is when you start doing something like this, if you get passionate about it, prepare yourself for the fact that you're going to lose that passion elsewhere. And you got to be okay with it. I mean, it was a struggle for me. I mean, I spent well over half of my life with one company, and I was emotionally vested in it and financially. And to have to admit to myself that I wanted to leave corporate America, that I wanted to leave, you know, a management level position where I was well paid and highly thought of, to want to do that, to admit that I wanted to do that, I had to come to terms with that myself, because
And to know that you were disappointing those people that you'd worked with. Like,
yeah,
that weighed on you a little bit.
it did weigh on me a lot. If you align your identity with a corporate job and you want to change that, don't lose sight of the fact, and this happened with me, and it was hard to watch it, but I knew it was going to happen, that any job you're at, you will be replaced the next day. It's a job.
Right.
Don't forget that.
Yeah.
It was almost ego busting for me to see, well, they moved it right along.
Yeah.
I left on Friday, and on Monday they were back at it.
Right.
Cool, and that's great, but don't let your ego get the best of you and think they need me, it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
You got to live your life for you, not for somebody else, for a paycheck.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think it's really important for young people to hear that too, that it's not about that. And there's so much more to life than your career or money. So much more.
And not to say there's anything wrong with it. If that is your life, then that's your choice. It's cool, but just be objective about it. If you put your identity into your job,
right,
that's fine, but you just have to recognize that that is what your identity is, and to change that is hard.
and you also have to let yourself be the new thing. Like, it took us several years to be like, okay, so we're farmers now?
we do this, yeah.
Like, this is what we do. Like, I'm really doing this?
Especially as modern people, people living in the 2020s, it feels almost a little weird, like we're going back in time or something. But
imposter syndrome, that's the other thing. It's serious imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not really good at this. I'm not really doing this. But what I am, it's here.
Right.
Like,
as humans, we're supposed. I believe we're supposed to be doing this. If growing, even just if it's just a plant in your apartment, there's just something about the connection to nature.
And any level of that, is real. If you're doing it, you're doing it. Like, let yourself feel good about it.
Yeah. If people would like to find out more about Gooseberry Bridge Farm and more about your work and learn more from you guys, you shared so many great tips.
Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We've got a presence on all three, and we're constantly putting out new content.